Every team in the NFL needs a backstop to back up their defense and keep everything in front of them. Who will fill those roles this year in Kansas City? Welcome to Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, friends and neighbors. It is another day here in Chiefs Kingdom. We're glad that you could join us. Make sure you like, sub, and hit the bell and get subbed over on YouTube where we start. And then all the audio platforms you can find, you can get subbed there as well. Spotify, Apple, etc. Thanks for making us your first listen. Make another Locked On show your next listen, because we're all here 5 days a week on every NFL channel, plus the national shows that can get you all the information you want and need right now. I'm really excited about this because this is one of the few positions we're going to talk about today as we start to get ready for training camp that has some changes at starter. Safeties are today. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, NFL33.com, and RGR Football.
And I'm Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner, and there are some changes, whichever way you want to put it, at the safety position this season. It happens, and we're looking at different. I mean, this is also interesting because of the lack of numbers that they have at the position when you get into training camp. That's kind of surprising as well. If you can, or if you would like, just remember we are available via text now, 816-357-8781. There is going to be a ton more coming via the text line, especially with camp just right around the corner, kicking off in just over a week.
If you want updates when you want them, what we see at camp, what we hear about, you want to get in on that text line and get in on the conversation. So get subbed over there. I'm excited because this is going to be a change. If you missed our earlier show, again, we are here 5 days a week all year long, and we already talked about the corners earlier this week. If you missed that show, go back and check that out because it ties in with the safeties quite a bit. Is there some overlap? Right now on the Kansas City roster, there are 6, count them, just 6 safeties that are real. The Chiefs website actually lists them a little bit differently, and I will show you that here shortly as we take a look. It does have Nic Jones, who is really an inside corner, listed as a DB, same as Joshua Williams, who's a corner. Deon Bush listed as a DB. He's going to play safety. You don't see any corner reps in his future. Same with Caprio, et cetera. And one guy that's kind of listed out of place on the Chiefs' current website is Najee Johnson, who we know is repping it at nickel corner. So to run down who we have that are actual safeties, and some hybridization is always good, but Justin Reid, certainly the acquisition from last year, other than one misstep against the Bengals week, put in a good solid season in Kansas City. One of the leaders of this defensive roster, certainly at the back of the defense, is going to be the top headliner here at quote-unquote free safety. Bryan Cook, Chamarri Connor, Mike Edwards, Anthony Cook, I know that's hard to remember, and Deon Bush round out this safety group, with knowing that corner group has 12 people in it right now. There is a little bit of overlap depending on whether you like a nickel outside corner hybrid or you like a nickel safety hybrid. There's a little bit of things that we can do there. But one thing is absolutely true. Juan Thornhill is a Cleveland Brown right now. And that means that Bryan Cook moves from third safety into the starting rotation at strong, quote unquote, with Justin Reid. I love the combination. Everyone knows that I was high on Bryan Cook coming out and off of his college film. What he can bring, I think, is very dynamic for this defense. And I think allows them to take the next step forward in being more versatile. Now, we all know that Justin Reid is the stalwart and the rock back there, right? What do you need to see from Justin Reid as he starts to work with a new partner?
Just familiarity with the two and them being on the same page. And you're going to have a chance to see that in camp. You're going to see him talking. And that's what really, when you want them to get it figured out, is in camp and in preseason games. It's what does the back end of the defense look like? Do people get behind them very often? How do they adapt when, you have different defenses that are being called? Because training camp, you see a little bit of everything. You see, obviously you're watching offensive line, defensive line, you're watching corners, you're watching wide receivers, but it's also seeing those guys on the back end that, how are they going to attack different things? How are they going to have them playing? Free safety and strong safety are a little different, but those guys are pretty interchangeable in a lot of ways. So I think you're going to be in a situation where I think It's going to be very interesting to see how they use Cook, how they use Reid, how they use, Johnson and who they brought in, as that third guy.
And I think Mike Edwards, you mean, or do you mean Najee
Edwards?
Johnson?
Sorry, not Johnson.
Okay.
Not Johnson. Sorry. Yeah, I mean Edwards. Sorry.
Well, I think that's really intriguing as well, because it feels like with the addition of Joe Cullen taking over the defensive front, it's allowing Steve Spagnuolo to spend a little bit more time with Dave Merritt working on the back end of the defense. And I like what you said there. They are interchangeable in that Justin Reid can come down and play strong as well. I think he's solid in the box. He certainly has the pursuit angles, and he understands how to tackle well against bigger opponents, guys that have size and weight on him. I think Bryan Cook needs to learn some discipline, little self-control. He allows his emotions to flare, to tell you the truth. One of the things that I love about the player, this goes back to that old adage, I'd rather have to tell a guy to chill out than to get fired up. That's what I'm looking for here. But I do think that they are more versatile back and forth than we think. Now, Juan Thornhill was a deep center fielder. He could play high. Putting him in the box was never the greatest thing. You could bring him on some blitzes. I think he had a decent feel for that. So does Cook. So I don't think you lose anything when Cook is in the box. Reid, I think, can play there as well. This feels a little bit more interchangeable in terms of practice rather than ability, right? I think we could see Cook high single some too.
And that's what makes it so that's actually what makes it so much better than last year. And I like what Juan Thornhill brought to this roster. I like what he was able to do. I don't think he ever really regained fully what he was able to do when he was younger and when he was a rookie. I think that he got close, but I don't think he fully got back there. But what I like about this more is now you're in a situation where you have both those guys. You feel like you can change them in and out. So defense an offense isn't going to necessarily be able to look and see where your safety is and know exactly what you're doing based on where the safety is. That is helpful to your defense because you're not giving away tells near as much.
Yeah, that's the key. And I think Spags, more than a lot of other defense coordinators, rely on that, is not giving things away, being able to disguise where you're going. I think we could see some tweaks there. I'm really interested in who can help them make those tweaks. Who's the third guy in? There is a question there. But first, we have to make a bet on it. And if you were going to do that, now's the time to get over to FanDuel. This is the perfect spot because it's in full swing in Major League Baseball. You can go take advantage of it. And right now on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, you can get up to 10 times your first bet in bonus bets if your first bet loses. That's up to $2,000. That's right. Just bet $20, and if you lose, you'll land $200 into your bonus bets right off the bat, win or lose. Super simple. It's $200 for betting everything from a money line to who hits the first dinger, everything. I was just at the Rockies game the other night for a fireworks celebration. I should have put some money on that, but I don't know baseball enough to even do it intelligently. But I know you guys can. It's all in the app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. You can get paid instantly out of it as well. That's a nice plus. So go sign up today. It's over at FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can see here below me on YouTube. Get that $200 right now in bonus bets. It's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel's the official betting partner of the MLB, the NBA, and your NFL. Now, if I was betting on who the third safety was going to be, it would be a bit intriguing to me because monetarily in free agency, it would be very, very clear that Mike Edwards is the next guy up to come on the field. We know Spags like 3 safety sets, so this might be a little bit more important for Kansas City than he is for a lot of teams of who their safety is, who the third safety being more of a backup player, right?
Yeah, and the thing that really is going to be curious to me, and I know we're talking safeties, but I do think it really kind of fits into how this is going to work. How does Drew Tranquil fit into the defense? And I say that because you're looking at a scenario where maybe he's going to take some of those third safety snaps because of the type of player he is, and he's able to give you a little bit more in the run game as well.
Yeah, Tranquil certainly fits the mold of hybridization, right? So now we're talking about not just a safety down to a robber. It's not just a robber down to a nickel, but a robber or a strong safety into a nickel linebacker. All these hybrid points are guys that can do a bit of both. I think it's going to come into play in training camp about who and how they can perform in those roles.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm not saying that Tranquil is going to take safety snaps and be a free safety or be a strong safety in that regard. I'm just saying he's going to play into how the defense lines up, and if they're going to be going to make more 3 safety sets, or maybe they're going to keep Tranquil on the field and be able to go with 3 linebackers instead of having to go 3 safeties, which gives them the ability to stop the run a little bit more, because Tranquil does give them that ability. And that's going to be what's really going to be curious to me. I still think when you talk third safety, you're probably talking about Mike Edwards.
I generally would agree with you. And I know in terms of compensation, given that what we see from everybody else, Deon Bush was a relatively low end in terms of monetary acquisition. Chamarri Connor's a draft pick. Cook's a free agent. So everything after Mike Edwards is relatively cheap by NFL standards in 2023. So
Yep.
Mike Edwards' contract doesn't necessarily guarantee that he's on the field or that he is that third safety, but I think it would give him the head start. I would agree with you there. The question is,
at least when we get into camp,
training camp.
Yep. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what I was going to say. That's the big question. Do we get to a point where Chamarri Connor can take a step forward and become that third safety? Because if Connor can push for that third safety role, Edwards could be in a position where maybe I would still think he's on the roster, but that could be a little bit more difficult for him if he's not that third safety. Because you start looking at the younger guys and thinking, okay, your fourth safety is going to be more of a special teams guy. Fifth safety is definitely going to be a special teams guy. Are you going to keep 5 safeties, or are you only going to have 4? If you're only going to have 4, you definitely have to have 4 as your special team safety. And Deon Bush is a guy that filled in that role a lot. He was a core special teams guy last year. So that's really going to be the question. Can Chamarri Connor come in and take that position? Does he have the ability to come in and take that position, or does Edwards hold on to it?
Yeah, that's the big question, because I would consider Edwards a robber type, can play deep if he has to, can come in the box if he has to, but he belongs in the middle of the field in space. A lot of folks, he did get a number of interceptions. I think some of those were, I'm not trying to degrade him, but I think some of those were opportunistic. So I need to see that play out. I need to see that early, and I need to see it consistently in camp to stave off my comparison to Connor, who I know can do different things, but might have more impact given that you have Reid and Cook at the back. So I think that battle is not necessarily just for who's the third safety, but who can help the defense overall in not necessarily the same way, but have an effect on the defense as a unit.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the big question. And can Connor come in and get to a position where he can have that big effect on the unit? If he can, does that make Edwards expendable? I'm not saying I don't think that Edwards will be on the team. Right now, I do think he's on the team. And I think they keep 5 safeties, though it's possible if they don't keep 5 safeties that maybe he's not on the team if Connor steps forward and they decide, okay, well, we can go with Deon Bush. We feel comfortable enough with the other guys. Because, again, we talked about this earlier. Tranquil is going to play a lot in scenarios where that third safety in the past is played. And it's a question of, are you going to be using that third safety as much? Or is Chamarri Connor going to be the guy that comes in and he's going to be the rarity at the third safety because you're using Tranquil so much in that what used to be a third safety role, or the Dan Sorensen role of sorts?
Yeah, and that 3 safety set is what's going to make the determination about how many safeties you get. We have a disagreement, but we're going to cover who are the depth players who can make the practice squad and how many do they keep or should they keep right after this. So I'm going to come at you because I disagree. I don't think you can afford to keep 5 safeties on this 53-man roster, given what we talked about earlier in the week with the cornerback group. I think there's more talent there than there is at safety. Now, don't get me wrong. Deon Bush has put in good reps for this team. He has been a core contributor on special teams, as you said. But that level of talent, I don't think overshadows the corner depth at the third level that in today's game may become more and more and more important. So I lean towards just keeping 4, which puts that pressure on the 4th guy to play teams.
Yeah, and if that's the case, that's going to be even more important. And I think Connor can play teams. Obviously, Connor's going to be on this roster. I don't think that there's any way he's not on this roster. Obviously, apart from an injury, and that's always going to be the baseline of he's going to be on the roster, barring an injury and be on IR. But that's the big question is, can he step forward and take Edwards' spot? If he takes Edwards' spot, then you're in a scenario where if Connor's your 3, can you keep Edwards and have him be your special teams guy? Because if you can't, then you're in a situation where maybe it's Deon Bush.
And that's fair.
I don't know that I'd like it, but I think that there's a distinct possibility. Connor was talked up by a lot of people when it came to Kansas City getting him into how he can step in and help an NFL team. And he is able to do a lot of things that they have struggled with over the past. And again, I hate sounding like a drum, like a beating the same drum. Tranquil is going to have an effect on the safety group and what they do. So it does take into account how Tranquil is going to affect this group. Could put Edwards out of a job potentially. I don't know that I really see it happening, but if Connor makes it a clear case that he should be safety 3, then you're going to have a question who should be safety 4.
I agree. And here's the thing is I think there's also a numbers game that you have to play. Brett Veach and Andy Reid are very cognizant of getting guys onto the practice squad. Now, this is not to say that Anthony Cook can't make some noise. I've seen him make some plays on film. I just don't feel that he's ready to push for the 53, given the experience level and of the 4 guys ahead of him and the draft capital that was put into Chamarri Conner. So I do think that Anthony Cook is the guy outside the box looking in. But the question then becomes, could you get Mike Edwards or Deon Bush to the practice squad? I think you can get Bush there. I don't think you'll get Mike Edwards to the practice squad.
I agree. I think you don't get Edwards there. I'm not sure you would get Bush there. And the only reason I say that is because safety depth is so short supply across the NFL. 1, 2, he is a core special teams guy, and that is also short supply across the NFL. And when you start talking about the 53-man roster, you start talking about injuries when we're looking at, cut down day going into September, or basically September by the time it comes at the very end of August. I think you're in a scenario where maybe you could get Bush there. I think that it makes sense that you could get Bush there. But at the same time, a guy that's going to play core special teams is probably going to be at a little bit of a premium because people are always trying to churn the back of their roster in the NFL.
That's very true. And any small increment of upgrade is there. Now, maybe upgrading is the difficult part, but when you look at Mike Edwards, he's 27 years old. They brought him in here to play a role. And I believe that was the third safety at the time. The question, like you said, is Chamarri Conner, can he push him? Can he push past him is going to be the big question, because I'm not sure that I see that in the future. The only thing that I will say in the argument between Deon Bush and Mike Edwards is also going to be the Deon Bush is 29 now. I have to look at his birthday, but I want to say he's going to be 30 here shortly. So that is a concern as well. And that might be a factor if it comes down to those. And like you said, we know Chamarri Conner is going to be one of the safeties. You have to pick and choose. If Connor wins that third role, then it might come down to youth as a proportion of being able to play teams. And that would swing back in the favor of Edwards, in my opinion.
Yeah, it could. And, if Edwards is a guy that can step in and be okay on teams, then that's going to help his case as well. I just know that looking at what they did with Bush last year, Bush was consistently a core special teams guy. He was always active because he was on special teams, and that was his role. And if you look at what Kansas City dealt with when it came to special teams play last year, taking another step back and having one of the guys that has consistently been a special teams guy throughout his career off this roster is going to be something that they can do. I don't think they're going to want to do it. It's going to be a question of whether or not they think somebody else can step in and play that role.
Well, and let's see. Mike Edwards is what? 2.8 against the cap. If they were to let him go, I think they recover like $400K. Whereas Deon Bush is less than 1.1 against the cap. But if he were let go, you would recover $740K. So monetarily, it makes more sense to, again, go with Mike Edwards. That's a couple of factors in his favor, and that's kind of the way that I'm leaning now. The only question is going to be special teams capability, in my opinion.
And that's the big question. I mean, that's really what it's going to come down to is if Edwards is passed by Connor. And that's the other thing you start looking at, from last year, you start looking at how is Edwards playing last year? They brought him in to be the third safety. That's the type of contract he got. They brought him in to be that guy. They didn't know they were going to get Connor in the draft. Now they have Connor. Can Connor step forward and do that? And that's really where we are right now. If he can, then that's going to be an issue. And I'm not sure how that's going to shake out for Edwards. And it's going to be a question of, and there's also a part of it of what does it look like? How does it look with, how does it look with Edwards on the field? How is he looking this season? Because there is a question mark there as well. How does that affect who you keep?
I agree. Let me put it this way. It feels like to me, it's Mike Edwards' third job to lose.
Yep.
And if not, it becomes the question of who fills the gap.
Agreed.
Okay. We'd like to know.
I completely agree with that. I think that's absolutely the case.
Okay. And right now, I'm not trying to say that Chamarri Conner is going to beat him out. I'm just saying that is one of the possibilities because he's not going to go anywhere. So if it is only 4, I do think it's Edwards. If Edwards should win out, knock on wood, it should be Edwards and Connor. And Deon Bush would be let go, possibly reacquired or brought to the practice squad if available. If they keep 5, then I think it's real simple. You keep all 3 of those guys. Anthony Cook's on the outside looking in.
Yep.
Okay.
And obviously, it's a question mark of who shows up in camp. I mean, that's what it always is. But the starters, I think, are pretty much set. I don't think you're going to see anything that's going to change at the starting position. But the big question mark, and here's something that we haven't talked about when you start looking at the starters. Cook was a core special teams guy last year too. Mm-hmm. Where are his snaps going to go? Because he's not going to be playing teams the way he was last year. He may help on a team here, a team there, but as a starting safety, he's not going to be a core special teams guy.
Very true. I mean, and there is a plus there's a knack for making plays, right?
Yep.
And Mike Edwards he's averaging over the last 3 seasons 3 interceptions per year.
Yep.
That's pretty consistent. So you got to have the playmaker ability as well. So we were going to see how it breaks down. Who do you think is the third safety coming into this season? Who do you think makes this roster? How many do they keep? Leave your comments and thoughts on the YouTube comments, over in the Spotify and Apple reviews. Thanks for spending your day with us. Tomorrow, we'll be back with another position tomorrow. Have a good day, and we'll talk to you then.